Okay, the United States finds itself in a possible three-pronged war where they're backing a NATO proxy war against Russia. They're now backing Israel with this emotional war that could get really big if it's not tamped down. We also have China watching in the background. Is now the time to make a move on Taiwan or just to continue to funnel money through Iran? Here to help me get through all this is former CIA Larry Johnson. Larry, thank you for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure, Stephen.
Wow, a lot going on, high emotions around all of it. And I appreciate you coming on to help me make sense of all of it. I want to get into some Russia-Ukraine stuff to start off. The 31 Abrams tanks have arrived in Ukraine, and we're getting mixed feedback. One of the politicians there, by the name of Oleksiy Gonocharenko in Kyiv, said, "We're very thankful to the United States for this donation, but these tanks will not make a difference in the war." What do you think his thinking is? Is this just too little, too late, and basically the war is winding down? Are they seeing that these tanks are significantly more vulnerable than they expected? What do you think his thinking is on this?
Well, number one, they're difficult to maintain. Number two, you have to have properly trained tank crews. They haven't had any time really to train in those tanks. And just being able to drive it off the parking lot doesn't mean that you necessarily know how to operate it in a combat environment. But more to the point, they've now going on almost 5 months experience going up against Russian defensive lines, and the Russians are blowing up every tank that gets close to the defensive lines. Not a single tank's broken through. So it's almost like that with the advent of modern intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, ISR, the tank's on its way to becoming an irrelevant weapon, because before, like in World War II, you could hear them, and maybe if you got an airplane up, you could see them, but being able to precisely locate them in real time was difficult. Well, it's not difficult anymore. They can with a drone can get a precise geo coordinate and then send in an artillery strike or a drone and blow it up. So he's right that the tank's not going to make a single bit of difference. Ukraine has lost the core of its trained personnel. And the only way you can make that up is with new recruits who have gone through extensive training. And even then, once they come out of training, they're still raw combat soldiers. They have not experienced combat. And they'll still be green and they'll still make mistakes. Russia doesn't have that problem at all.
Yeah.
So Ukraine's at a decided disadvantage.
Yeah. Well, the ISR has been a game changer. For example, I'm reading that the United States provided these supposedly advanced ATACMS, and they fired them off, and they were able to destroy, I believe, around 14 helicopters. But
that's the Ukrainian story. So
okay,
they're like a bad fisherman. I caught a fish this big. It's like the Russians are reporting more like 3. Okay. And overhead image seems to support the Russians on that. So I understand the Ukrainians, the one thing they've been good at over the course of this war over the last now 20 months is lying and exaggerating.
Now, but by firing those ATACMS, wouldn't their ISR be able to basically pick up on the trigonometry and the trajectory and now be able to map those and make that a useless weapon?
It appears that the bases they hit, and again, they're hitting these with support of U.S. and British intelligence, NATO intelligence. They had identified areas that didn't have robust air defense system, and so they hit those. And the Russians now, they learn from that. They remember the HIMARS. They had some hits with HIMARS early on. Then the Russians figured that out. Remember the Storm Shadow, the British cruise missile? Haven't heard much about that lately, have you?
Yeah.
Because they're in limited numbers. And the same with the ATACMS. The reports are that the U.S. sent about 12. And if it's true that Ukraine fired off 9 of them the other day, okay, they got 3 left. The search for wonder weapons keeps ignoring the fundamentals of war, that you have to have personnel and you have to have a strategy worth your salt. And Ukraine has neither.
It seems their greatest weapon has been the drones, the drone attacks, versus these super expensive, complicated, crew-dependent attack systems. The drones seem to be the game changer in this war on the Ukraine and on the Russian side. Western media, and I do say Western media, is reporting that while we've all been distracted with the Hamas, Israel, Iran situation, that Ukraine has made great advancements, taking out 120 tanks.
It's delusional stuff.
1,300 Russians killed, 29 Russian artillery systems just in the last few days. Is this the final gasp? It feels like propaganda to me, because what I'm reading from international news is that Russia just continues to move forward, taking back territory.
Yeah. No, it's just the Ukrainians are doing everything in their power to get attention back on them. This is you've got more than one kid. You know what it's like when you bring the new baby home from the hospital. The kid who was there first is jealous. All of a sudden, not the center of attention. Only it's worse here with Zelensky. He's a cocaine addict on top of it. So, they're doing everything in their power to get the West, hey, pay attention to us. And, the West actually cares about Israel, at least the United States. From a political standpoint, the Jewish lobby is so powerful in the United States, and the evangelical community embraces it as well, that Israel is a number one priority.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Ukraine, people have trouble spelling it.
Yeah. Moving on to the Israel situation. A couple days ago, the remaining head of Hamas called for all Arab nations to begin mobilizing attacks on Israel. Is this something that you see actually happening, where we could see other Arab nations beginning to attack? Or do you believe with the Abraham Accords, some of these nations are now saying, we don't want to get involved. We would rather trade Israel and Palestine and Hamas. You guys can figure it out on your own.
I think the Abraham Accords are dead. The Arab and Muslim world are united now against Israel and in favor of the Palestinians in a way that I have never seen it. I don't think there's not a period since the establishment of Israel in 1948 comparable to this. Recall that the Egyptians, for example, were never, ever big fans or supporters of Hamas because of Hamas's role in its prior incarnation as the Muslim Brothers assassinated Anwar Sadat back in 1981. So we're talking events that were 42 years ago. Similarly with the Saudis, they were never enamored of Hamas. Hamas's support always came through Qatar. And it's reported that some of the money going to them came out of actually Bibi Netanyahu and Israeli intelligence service going to Hamas. So it's not this simple black and white picture. It's been very confused. But what has transpired over the last 14 days since the start of this, since Hamas launched its terrorist attack and then Israel started with its retaliation, you've seen Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Iran, go down the list. They're all coming together, and Morocco speaking out in favor, South Africa, not Arab, not Muslim, speaking out strongly on behalf of the Palestinians. So Israel has succeeded now in uniting the world, a significant portion of the world, against it. And they're now demanding that there be a Palestinian nation, a single country where the Palestinians control it, and the Israelis don't get to treat them like concentration camp victims. Lock them up, surround them with barbed wire. And to underscore, I guess, the fragility of the situation and the weakness of the United States, Tony Blinken got completely rebuffed by both Egyptian President al-Sisi. And then when he's supposed to meet with bin Salman in Saudi Arabia Saturday night, and bin Salman kept him waiting all night long. And it was only the next morning that the Blinken got to see bin Salman, and bin Salman basically told him, hey, yeah, no, we're no interest in doing what you want us to do. Have a nice day. Then Joe Biden goes to see Bibi Netanyahu, but part of that trip was after he was going to coordinate with Netanyahu, get an agreement from Netanyahu on how to provide humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. Then he was going to go meet with al-Sisi of Egypt, the King of Jordan, who was hosting the meeting, and Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority. After the attack on the church, the Baptist church, I might add, not the Muslim church, not the Coptic Christian church, but the Baptist church, they canceled. They blew off Biden. They wouldn't meet with him. So the United States in the past used to be able to go to like Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Jordan, get them to intervene behind the scenes, even the Qataris. And it looks like Qatar today did intervene in negotiating a deal with Hamas to release 2 American women that were being held hostage. But other than that, over 190 are still being held. So the U.S. and Israel both are in a more precarious place now than they were 3-4 weeks ago.
President Biden announced that he'll be using $100 million of U.S. taxpayer money to provide humanitarian aid to Palestine. Do you believe that money will actually get to the people in need? And if so, are they going to route it through Egypt or Jordan or Qatar? How would they even get that money in there?
Yeah, well, it's supposed to go in through Egypt, through the south. The Al Rafah is the crossing point, but Israel's not letting any humanitarian aid in there. And see, this is the problem Israel faces. Even though it suffered enormous losses in the terrorist attack by Hamas on the 7th of October, it's seen as a bully because it has continued in its bombings to kill civilians, women and children. The video images are out there. They are ubiquitous. They're not made up. And we've never had in any of the previous conflicts with Israel this powerful of a social media platform. The last real big blow up was the 2014 in Gaza, 2006 in Lebanon against Hezbollah. You didn't have Instagram, TikTok. Twitter was sort of an emerging new thing, but that's not the case now. And in previous in blow-ups like this in the Middle East, it was always managed by corporate media. So in the United States, you'd see the story on ABC, CBS, NBC. You would see this written up in the Washington Post, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, Philadelphia Inquirer, etc. Not now. Those media platforms have shrunk dramatically. And the social media platform, which is largely pretty difficult to control, is out there pushing the memes and the narratives. So Israel has been terrible at PR, just terrible. And they're getting crushed on the public relations side. Because now, remember, Hamas and Egypt, not friends. Egypt's come out and said the Palestinian people need to have a homeland. Yeah. So when you've got Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Turkey all lined up, and Turkey's the real concern because they've got the biggest army in the Middle East. Remember, they're the second largest army in NATO. Before the start of the special military operation, Ukraine was the second largest de facto army, but it wasn't an official member of NATO. Turkey's a member of NATO. It's got the second largest army in NATO. I think 2 million men strong. If they decided to go against Israel, Israel doesn't have anything to stop that.
Yeah.
And what this has done is united actually Turkey and Syria against Israel at this time. So, and making it worse is within Israel. They're as divided as Americans are politically, if not more so. And you've got this ultra right wing group that are insisting, and I mean, they're saying such things as the Palestinians need to be destroyed. Not the people who carried out the attack. They want to destroy the entire Palestinian people. So, you know, what are you going to, it is, like I said, with this kind of volatile environment, people are not thinking with their heads. It's all with their heart and their gut.
Yeah.
It's very, very emotional, and it's very, very irrational at times.
Yeah. My worry, and you and I have privately texted about this, is Israel was attacked. Israel had 1,200 to 1,300 people killed, hundreds of people, you know, taken hostage. They've now begun their retaliation. They've already killed 3 times as many people as were killed in the attack. And the United States is saying, be very careful. We overdid it after 9/11, and it haunted us for 2 decades. You guys could be walking into a PR nightmare. Half of Palestine is children, teen years and younger. And if those children start being wiped out, and, you know, like you say, the cameras, the independent journalists, the social media, this could end up being a massive PR nightmare, where really Israel just started out with like, hey, we need to avenge the 12 or 1,300 that were killed. And now that this could blow up into something much, much, much worse than any of us ever anticipated when we started covering this story about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It is, Israel's lost control of the narrative. You know, before it always had, it could play what I'd call the Samson, the David and Goliath card. They were David fighting the Goliath, the evil giant. But now, you know, the images show up. You've got hundreds of Israeli tanks lining up outside the Gaza border. Hamas doesn't have a single tank. So Hamas is going to be the David. Israel's going to be the Goliath. And the rest of the Arab Muslim world sees that. Now, I'm not saying that's the right, correct, way to view it, but it doesn't matter what's right or correct. People have got to get out of that trying to figure out, hey, I'm right on this. It is, what do people believe outside of Israel? That's what matters. And they believe that Israel is a human rights violator, a killer of children, and a bully. And they want to see Israel get payback. I don't think that's healthy, because that will lead to war, and it's likely to lead to great loss of life in Israel, which is exactly what Israel doesn't want. And so I think we can't pretend that the concerns being voiced by the Arab and Muslim world are irrelevant or must be ignored because they're wrong. Well, it is what they believe, and you got to start with that reality, and then try to work back, try to get it calmed down, try to defuse it. But when I said Israel is now its own worst enemy, they said, we don't bomb hospitals and churches. And then overnight, they've blown up a mosque and part of the oldest Christian church in Gaza, and have admitted to it. Yeah. And they've killed civilians. They killed 16 Christians. So now it's not just a Muslim thing. And these Christians are not, Muslim terrorists. They were taking refuge, and they had some special needs people in there. So those images get out, those stories get out, and it's just going, for those who hate Israel, it's going to reinforce everything they believed in. And so instead of closing that divide that separates people, it's just going to get wider and wider and wider. And it's the only way it's going to get settled is through violence, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's That's the part that I hate. That's the part that I hate covering. Final question, then I'll let you out. Vladimir Putin this week said two things. He said, number one, the media needs to quit reporting that Russia is going to attack the United States with a nuclear weapon. We have no desire and no plan to do that. The second thing he said, with a bit of a smirk, was the United States and the world needs to admit that Russia has won the Ukraine war, and that Joe Biden should come to Russia and have cookies and tea with me and be done with this. What are your thoughts on these comments?
Well, I think Putin made a mistake in offering cookies and tea. If he had offered an ice cream cone, I bet you Joe Biden would be there in a heartbeat. You know, chocolate chip, yeah, he'll be over there. No, I mean, Putin throughout this entire war has been a very cool customer. He doesn't get rattled. He is unflappable. And he's been very down. He says what he means what he says. And we're foolish to not take him at his word. And because before he warned that, you know, if you're going to continue down this road of bringing Ukraine into NATO, we're going to stop it. That's a non-starter. We're not going to allow it to happen. So, and Putin, he made those remarks, I believe, just on the eve. He made it to a Chinese journalist as he was headed to Beijing for this the Open Road Summit with the Chinese. So they are strengthening their relations with countries that are not in the sphere of control of the United States, and in some cases even dealing, you know, making inroads with those countries that have been considered U.S. allies. So you saw, in fact, just on the eve of that summit, Xi Jinping brought in all the Middle East and Arab ambassadors or leaders, foreign ministers, to meet with him to talk about what they needed to do for creating a true Palestinian independent country. So this is what has escaped the United States is the fact that a new world order has emerged, and we're not in charge of it.
Yeah. Well, Biden said in his address to the nation that the United States is at an inflection point, and might be one of the more true things he's ever said on TV.
Yes.
Well, Larry, I want to thank you for coming on. I'll continue to monitor this. You continue to monitor this. I'm just hoping and praying that this goes down a good path and not down the bad path. But it does have me very nervous, and I appreciate you coming on and putting, you know, giving your 2 cents on what's going on.
I'm always happy to chat with you, Stephen. Thanks, man.
Okay, bye-bye.